Always helps if you unmute. Good evening, good day, ladies and gents, wherever you may be around the world, and welcome to Splendid Isolation number 152. That one's done. Good. Okay. As always, I'm going to start us off with a bit of a tune, assuming it works, of course.
Take up the white man's burden, send forth the best ye breed. Go bind your sons to exile, to serve your captives' need, to wait in heavy harness on flooded folk and wild. Your new God sullen peoples have devil and have child. Take up the white man's burden, in patience to abide, to veil the threats of terror and check the show of pride. By open speech and simple, 100 times made plain, to seek another's profit and work another's gain. Take up the white man's burden, the savage wars of peace. Fill full the mouth of famine and bid the sickness cease. And when your goal is nearest, the end for others sought, what's love that Eden fondly bring all your hopes to loss. Take up the white man's burden, not tawdry rule of kings, but toil of serf and sweeper, the tale of common things. The ports ye shall not enter, the roads ye shall not tread. Go make them with your living and mark them with your dead. Take up the white man's burden and reap his soul's reward. The blame of those ye better, the hate of those ye guard. The cry of those ye humor are slowly towards the light. Why brought ye us from bondage, our loved Egyptian guys? Take up the white man's burden, ye dare not stoop to less, nor call too loud on freedom to cloak your weariness. By all ye cry or whisper, by all ye leave or do, the silent, sullen people shall wait your gods and you. Take up the white man's burden, have done with childish days, the lightly proffered laurel, the easy young grudge praise. Come thou to search our manhood through all of thankless years, nor age with dear bought wisdom, the judgment of your peers. Take off the white man's burden through all the thankless years.
Oh, there you go. Just for a change, the song worked perfectly, I believe. That was, of course, the excellent Chris Gard. Do go and check out his YouTube channel. The original work was obviously the poem by Rudyard Kipling. Might have a very short stream this week, guys, because I don't have any guests at the moment. One of my regulars I know is at a Christmas party. I was never very keen on Christmas parties myself, but then I'm probably just a bit antisocial. So there we go. Not quite sure what we're going to talk about this week. It's not been a particularly big news week, I don't think, since most of the stuff that's going on has been going on now for quite some time, i.e. whatever's going on in Gaza and also whatever is going on in Ukraine. Basically, in Gaza, Israel doesn't seem to be going all that quickly, and in Ukraine, Russia continues to win, which some of us always predicted was going to be the case, even right back at the start. So yeah, I have been listening because I'm trying to do part 2 of my Wellington podcast, which I've been threatening people with for weeks and weeks now, but I haven't got around to doing just because I've been a bit tied up doing other things. But I have been doing some research for it this week, and the part 2 is mainly going to be Wellington in the Peninsula. And as a result of that, I've been listening to and watching quite a few videos and podcasts by other people about Wellington. And one of the things I noticed is that some people get basic stuff wrong. Like, people will say things like, Sir John Moore was in charge originally in the Peninsula, not Wellington. Which is not true. Wellington was in charge of the first 2 battles in the Peninsula and beat the French in both of them. And then he was superseded by these 2 useless British generals. When Wellington famously said, "I don't know what these men will do to the enemy, but by God, they frighten me," he was referring to some of his senior officers. He wasn't referring to the soldiers, by the way. But these included Sir Harry Burrard and the other chap who replaced Wellington. Good to hear. Mitch is going to be joining me soon. That's good to hear. So he was referring to his senior officers, not the ordinary regimental officers and soldiers who did most of the actual fighting. He was really referring to his generals and a few of his colonels. And he was actually in charge of the first 2 battles in the Peninsular War. He was only then replaced by these 2 non-entities, who then negotiated a bad peace with the with the French in Portugal. And as a result, all 3 officers, including Wellington, who only reluctantly signed it, and who, he wasn't in charge at that stage, all of them had to face a court of inquiry back in Britain because these French troops were evacuated from Portugal in British ships, and they took loads of loot with them because everywhere the French Napoleonic army went, it looted, because basically the French soldiers couldn't survive without stealing from the locals. And that included the peasantry, who they would steal food from, and richer people, who they would steal any items of value from. And also, of course, they would also steal items of value from churches and what have you, which did not make them popular in Catholic countries like Portugal and Spain. So Wellington was actually initially in charge, not Sir John Moore. Sir John Moore took over after that, and then led what can only be described as I won't say it was a disastrous campaign, but it wasn't a successful campaign, partly because, of course, the Spanish didn't cooperate with him at all. But he ended up having to take to his heels and pursued by Napoleon himself and a large proportion of the French Grand Army. And eventually they got to Corunna in northern Spain, where they fought a successful battle, which enabled them to get on the Royal Navy ships that had been sent for them and return to England. And Sir John Moore himself was actually killed in that battle. He was hit by a solid iron cannonball, which never did anyone much good. And so Wellington was then sent back to the peninsula to take over from Moore, because Wellington had said that he thought Portugal was defensible even if we couldn't hold Spain. And of course, Wellington was correct in this, as he was correct in most things, to be quite honest. The other thing that I have noticed from listening to other people's videos and podcasts about Wellington is that people are often at some pains, for reasons I don't know, to say that Wellington despised his troops. I don't think Wellington despised his troops at all, to be honest with you. I think he was realistic about why they volunteered, although, to be fair, there were adventurous young men who used to join the British Army just out of a sense of patriotism and adventurism, even back then, which is still the main reason that people join the army, or until recently it was anyway. But yeah, there were a lot of quite hard-bitten people in his army who did like their booze and their professional ladies and all this kind of stuff. But in contrast to that, when Wellington when he stopped being a general after Waterloo, when he didn't command in action anymore, whenever he rode anywhere in London, including when he was Prime Minister and so on, he would always have a few golden guineas in his waistcoat pocket, and he would give one of these to any soldier who had been one of his veterans, providing he could answer a couple of straight questions from Wellington about what unit he was in and where he served, because Wellington didn't want to be conned, obviously. But if he could answer those questions, anyone who actually asked him would be given a sovereign, which is the equivalent almost today of giving someone a month's pay on the street. So quite a lot of money. And I think that's worth pointing out about Wellington as well. So I don't hold with some of the stuff I've been listening to while I've been doing this research. The final thing I would point out, and I mustn't claim credit for this, because I think it was Apostolic Majesty who mentioned it on one of his streams on the appalling Napoleon film that has come out recently that I have not watched and have no great intention of watching, because apparently it's really terrible historically. And this is that one of the reasons Napoleon was able to produce such a powerful army in 1815 after he escaped from Elba and took over France again was that the French had got all their prisoners of war back, many of which had been held in Britain, but also by the Austrians and the Russians and the Prussians and so on. They had got all those prisoners of war back, and that included loads of well-trained officers and NCOs who had been in the Grand Army back in its heyday. So to try and claim that Napoleon's army at Waterloo was not very good is just not true. It was undoubtedly the best army Napoleon had since he was soundly defeated in Russia in 1812. It was a much better army than he had fought with in 1813 and 1814. Had far more and better cavalry as well, which is something that really crippled him in 1813 and 1814, was his lack of cavalry, because most of the horses had been killed in Russia. So the army that Wellington faced at Waterloo was actually a very good army in terms of the French. The final thing before we move on to other stuff, because now I've got mentioned as a guest, I'm happy to say, is that a lot of people are saying, oh, well, Wellington's army wasn't really British and this kind of stuff. What I would point out to people is, yes, he had a lot of Dutch troops and he had a fair number of German troops. The German troops that Wellington had included the King's German Legion, and the King's German Legion were an integral part of the British Army back then. They wouldn't have been there had they not been the King's German Legion, because the British King was also the Elector of Hanover. And there were also some Hanoverian troops there who were not as well trained as the King's German Legion. The King's German Legion was some of the best troops in the British Army, without any doubt at all. But they were part of the British Army. And they'd also fought in the Peninsula, of course. But Wellington's Dutch, and to a lesser extent his German troops, were a very mixed bag. The Dutch troops had very often been fighting for Napoleon only a year before and were not particularly reliable. Some units fought okay. Some units didn't fight hardly at all and ran away quite quickly. And what Wellington had to do was he had to mix his British troops, and he only had limited numbers of those. He had to mix in his British troops, who were reliable, if nothing else, in between the Dutch and German troops, other than the King's German Legion, of course, who were great soldiers, as I've been at pains to point out. But he had to mix his British troops in with them to stiffen them. And even his British troops were not the best British troops. Many of the best British troops still hadn't come back from North America, where they'd been doing things like capturing Washington, D.C. and burning down the White House and defending Canada from American invasion. And a lot of the best British troops had not yet returned. So Wellington at Waterloo had quite a lot of second battalions and what have you, who were not necessarily the best soldiers in those particular regiments. Anyway, that's more than enough of a historical homily from me, but hopefully I'll be able to bring some of these things out when I do my part 2 of the Wellington's military career stream. I'm hoping to get that out before Christmas, but we'll see. Mitch, how are you going, mate?
Same old, same old.
I shouldn't even ask, should I? Did you have a first subject that you wanted to bring up this week, mate?
I don't know if you want to talk about that clip that Morgoth put on his Twitter feed.
I haven't seen this, so by all means, yes, I haven't seen it yet. So if you want to explain, Mitch,
well, I showed it in my Discord. Where it was like, because he was going, because Morgoth reckons it'll be the end of feminism, just like
hopefully.
the economic reality. Well, the thing is, I mean, I don't think the attitudes will fully go away because I mean the holes of power that hold them up. But the thing is, I feel like it's just because of the economic realities we live in, we're going to end up having a conservative outcome of women pursuing relationships, as in not just like sleeping around and hooking up, like they have been done on Tinder, for example, but rather just getting into like actual relationships, just pure economic reality of the situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, actually, I do know the thing you're talking about now. I mean, people said, "Oh no, you're going to have more chicks going on OnlyFans and all this stuff." But
yeah, that's really the problem.
There are so many chicks already doing that, and only a few of them are making a lot of money. That was what Morgoth was saying about it. You know, it's oversupplied.
Yeah, the problem is it's like a Pareto principle where 20% rake in 80% of the money. So, so you can just imagine, like, you know, if a girl were to go on OnlyFans right now, she should be making bloody peanuts compared to what she thinks she'll make. So it's not a viable option. Yeah. The best option for her is to go with like a man who's actually earning well.
Well, I mean, I think that's generally been the best option for girls in any case. I mean, at least a guy with a stable income of some description. But
that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, women haven't been doing that because of the sexual revolution, like just been hooking up and whatnot. Like, well, both sides have been, but like the thing is now it's a situation where because of economic reality, women are going to have to shift their sense of relationships away from a feminist conception of just sleeping around, and now they're going to have to actually stay with a man because they can't make ends meet, regardless of how much they work, by themselves. So,
as we get into harder times, and we are heading into harder times for all of us, I suspect, a lot of women's jobs are make work. They really are. They're not vital. And some of them are going to be some of the first people who are going to lose their jobs anyway.
What's about me? Like this woman works in the care sector, which politicians love to talk about, and yet, like I mean, for example, she says about, for example, her insurance for a car, paying for petrol, and all this. It makes like there are times where this time of year she's having to go days without eating a meal, and then you just start there thinking, like, and she works in the care sector, which you would think they get paid all right-ish, but not. But like, I know school teachers, for example, they get paid peanuts. There's plenty of jobs out there where you get like relatively peanuts. I mean, you can get like manufacturing apprenticeships, which pay like 20 grand a year for first year apprentice, which is, but like, I don't know, a lot of jobs that women gravitate towards aren't exactly well paid, should we say?
No, they're not. And as I say, a lot of them are not very important. They're shuffling papers around somewhere, or sending emails, or these sort of make work office jobs. As you were saying, Mitch, if they're going to do OnlyFans, they've got to be like a 9 or a 10 to have any chance of making money on there. And most women are not 9s and 10s,
No, she'd have to be like bloody Helen of Troy, practically, to
make money on that. You've got to be at least like model actress rank in terms of what you look like. I mean, I'm not talking about you've got to be a nice person, obviously, because I don't think nice people would be doing that. But you've got to physically be a 9 or 10 to look at if you think you're going to make a living out of it. And women who are not those are not going to make a good living out of it. They're just not.
Yeah, so it's one of those situations where like our elites who hate us so much, but actually just allowing a conservative outcome to happen purely through accident because they're just incompetently winning the economy. Well, I mean, you could. I mean, on one hand, you can argue like they're just doing it because of malice, but let's say they want like us to like deprived of anything that might give us a sense of purpose or whatever. You'd think to themselves, yeah, let's keep the economy functioning enough for people so that single women can do well economically by themselves, and so they just carry on this hookup culture rather than making things so bad that these women now dump the hookup culture and now actually get back into relationships like what was normally the case like 50 years ago because they made things so economically bad for them. So,
well, I mean, the other thing I've noticed about this kind of related to this subject is people have been talking about these DINT people, double income and no kid, DINK people, I should say, double income and no kids, I think it stands for.
Yeah, it's like, I know, so they're saying stuff like, oh, well, because we don't have kids, we'll be able to go to every sports ball game. And I go, that's literally their conception of life is just material shit and going to football games, which chances are they're going to forget about in like a year's time.
Yeah, I mean, all I saw when they were talking about this, I watched a couple of videos which were taking the mickey out of them. And, all they were going on about is, oh, we can buy extra snacks at the supermarket and go and have, pumpkin spice lattes at the coffee shop and all this kind of nonsense crap that people do. So, I don't know. I mean, if you're going to be in a couple, I think the ultimate aim is you should have kids. I mean, that's the real idea of it, boys, to be honest.
Yeah, but it's like, I mean, on one hand, it's like, I don't know, the guy who was in that Dink video, he just looked like a bloody buffalo. It looked like that Ukrainian speaker of a parliament who,
oh, yeah.
I don't know if you see, yeah, he looks like that, which is like an ogre in human form.
Yeah, no, I look. As I said, if you're going to be in a long-term relationship with a woman, which I think is a good thing if you can do it and you can find a decent woman to do it with, your ultimate aim should be to have children. I mean, what's the point of it otherwise?
I mean, the thing is, like, both men and women see the dating game as a hookup. So I'm not exactly just saying, oh, it's only women who think of it as a hookup.
Yeah.
The men also go along with it. I'm not just saying, oh, the women are the only ones to blame in all this. It's also the men who enable it. So
yeah. I mean, the simps and so on. I mean, look at the OnlyFans situation. I mean, I think if you're going to look at OnlyFans, you've got to equally blame. In fact, probably more than equally blame the idiot blokes who give these women money. Because they're taking their clothes off and being a bit sexual on videos. Which is all they're doing. I mean, basically they're being video prostitutes. But you know what? The blokes are the people who are giving them money, and they're stupid.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I don't know, like the war on drugs, for example. It's like everyone just goes after the, like, they sort, like, I don't know. Let's say if you were really fought, you'd fight it by, making life a lot less miserable for people so they wouldn't have to go resorting to drugs to cope with how crap their lives are in this modern society. That's like how you'd fight a war on drugs. Not just take over drug dealers for example, but also just make life a lot more bearable so that people don't have to rely on drugs. Like, for example, I know in Holland, they legalised weed, and it's actually very cynical because a lot of people, they're not exactly living their best lives, but they just cope with it by just consuming loads of weed on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
So it's like, that's kind of like similar situations like the OnlyFans stuff. I mean, thinking a lot of the men who pay for that, those type of women, are the kind of blokes who look like they could start in a fucking Undimension meme or something.
I was watching a stream yesterday, Mitch, and it was actually like one of these what do they call them? Like popular culture streams. You know, you'll get these people who think that, you know, the woke has gone too far and we need to go back to the 1990s. And I'm probably being a bit unfair, but that's broadly the category they were in. And they were talking about some idiot bloke who'd given some woman $40,000 on an OnlyFans thing or something like OnlyFans.
I remember seeing something like, I remember seeing a meme where it said like this guy gave like so much money to a girl just to meet her for like 5 minutes. In, I think it was like Japan or something, like the girl was in, but she's like a Western girl living over there.
And she got. And was that coming from Japanese people or Western people or a mixture?
No, it was a guy in California, I believe. He flew over to like Japan, and he paid a lot of money on OnlyFans just to meet with her for 5 minutes.
Wow. And did he?
Yeah, and he's like, the guy is like, I mean, he looks like a complete buffalo, like kind of like, you know, the whole neck beard inside.
Okay, right.
But like a Reddit type, not like the caricature right wingers, but like a Reddit type.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think I can't really blame women who will do this shit if people are going to give them money for nothing, you know, which is basically what these dudes are doing. You know, these dudes are giving them money for nothing. I mean, even prostitutes, in my opinion, are a little bit more honest because, you know, you do get something back for that rather than just a vision on a screen. It's very strange, you know.
Yeah,
and I mean, I also agree with you with the pot smokers. I mean, look, I have smoked marijuana in my life. You know, I'm getting on a bit, but I've never been someone who smoked it every day, all day. Never, ever, ever. And everyone I've known that ever did do that is it just makes you incredibly lazy. You know, it does. It makes it incredibly lazy. So.
Well, so Ted Kaczynski said a great quote about it's like antidepressants, like drugs like that are only there to pacify people, not actually there to better your life. It's just, oh, the elites, they're making life shittier and shittier. But rather than solve the overall issue, they just give people weed or alcohol or drugs or whatever as a means of staying, like, so you never actually fix your life or like improve the society you live in. It's just there to pacify the people in much the same way I can't remember the name of the experiment, but they did a bunch of mice or rats, I believe, where like, and by the end, like the mice were just dying out because none of them were having babies one another. I can't remember the precise name. I can't remember the name of the experiment from the top of my head, but I remember hearing about it a while back.
Is this the what was it called? Mouse Utopia thing?
Yeah, I believe so.
Yeah, the Mouse Utopia thing goes, and they give the mice everything they need, and they all turn into various descriptions of like bad examples of mice. Yeah, Mouse Utopia. It was Mouse Utopia, but yeah, and all of them become misadapted eventually because they don't have to struggle for anything, and everything they need is provided for them in more than adequate quantities. So they don't have to look for food. They don't have to struggle to breed and all this kind of stuff. And of course, mice are a lot more simple than human beings in terms of their social structures, but they're still mammals and the basic stuff is still there. I mean, I think it's what I am not one of those people that goes on all the time about the amount of porn on the internet, but it is a fact that it is easier to find any sort of porn you might care to name on the internet for free. It's easier to do that than almost anything else on the internet. You know, if you want to research a historical subject, or you want to even look up a TV show or a movie or something like that, you can get far more porn of any description you care to think about for free, far more easily than you will find any of that other stuff. And I don't think that that's a mere coincidence, you know?
Also, there's a lot of big money into that industry, because I'm thinking it's not just that. I mean, another seedy thing is I remember like talking a month or like a few weeks back or something. But like, I know Zelensky's wife is accused of having some of her charities traffic children to very seedy people. I would say in like Slovakia and in Poland. So you can imagine what happens to those girls who then end up in that very seedy industry.
Well, so I mean, Ukraine's always been a center of the sex slave trade, that's for sure. Always has been. But also, it's one of the centers for people who want to buy babies. You know, if you're like a lesbian couple or a gay couple or something like that, and you want to buy a child, which I don't think you should be allowed to do at all, of course, and certainly not if you're lesbian or gay, and not in I think you should only ever be allowed to do that if you're in some sort of heterosexual couple relationship. But if you're going to go and buy a baby, I mean, this is one of this is another thing that Ukraine is extremely well known for.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, Russians with attitude probably best when they said Ukraine is basically just Russia, but it never got out of the 90s. So whereas Russia had Putin, who like brought in stability and order and whatnot, Ukraine was just a country which they never escaped that oligarchy crushing the country down, and it eventually morphs into what it is now, which is like a country that's prostituted to any Westerner with a big pocket, pretty much.
Yeah. I mean, you know, Ukrainian weapons have been turning up Western supplied Ukrainian weapons have been turning up all over the place. I mean, I know someone was talking about that on our Discord this week, Mitch. And I've seen people saying they've turned up in Gaza with the Hamas guys. So, this is the thing. Ukraine is such a corrupt nation. It really is, and always has been.
Yeah, it's like, I don't know if you noticed in all the like seething on Twitter where, for example, like, I know there's a bunch of Republicans who are saying, "Oh, we should," like, because they want to stop all funding to Ukraine because, oh well, it's very corrupt and all this, and all Ukrainians are like, "Oh well, blah blah blah." Like they're saying, "Oh well," or like they'll say, "Well, why doesn't Zelensky promise to resolve corruption?" Or and they go, "Well, why?" And the pro-Ukrainians go, "Oh, well, why would he want to talk about it in front of people who could cancel out his paychecks and all this?" And I'm just. And he's just sat there thinking, okay, so you'd rather just lie to the Americans about how bad your corruption is. That, so there's like, you can find plenty of stories of Ukrainian politicians who've got like $4 or $5 million in cash, just like going over to Slovakia.
Yep.
Because they've seen the writing on the wall regarding the war.
His wife is infamous for going around buying these enormously expensive clothes and shoes and stuff all over the world.
Yeah,
at a time when hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian young blokes are getting killed and maimed. She's going around spending like hundreds of thousands of dollars on the most expensive clothes she can find. It's insane, really.
Yeah, it's like, I know. It's like someone brought up Odessa. I mean, Odessa is like a meme in terms of like you'll just get like gangs of Turkish men who will just go over to holiday in Odessa, may just like sexually harass lots of Ukrainian women and whatnot. Like it's just a city where if you're a woman there and you're like you're sunbathing on the beach in the midst of summer, like you better have a bloke alongside you to scare off all the Turks. Otherwise, you're just going to be like subject to attention from those lot. And also you get, I don't know, like you get like the Westerners, like you get some Western blokes who like take advantage of the women in my area as well.
No, for sure. I mean, that's always going to happen. But again, I mean, I go back to what we were talking about earlier. In terms of men and women, when they're getting involved in anything where you are exchanging money for sexual favors, it takes two to tango. The woman must want to do it as well as the bloke. If you're talking about adults, obviously I am not talking about very young people at all.
Yeah.
But if you're talking about adult human females, i.e. women, getting involved in this, it does take two to tango. And this is why prostitution is often described as the world's oldest profession, and it probably is.
Yeah, it's like, I know. I mean, like, to get back to Morgoth's point about feminism dying, I don't know if that fully happened, because I mean, I don't know.
You've got to get rid of years and years of propaganda and brainwashing of women and girls. That's the problem.
Yeah, like, the thing is,
decades of it now.
Yeah, because that's the thing, Robo, is like, you'll still get women who are just like, I mean, that's one habit with a lot of women is once they're in a relationship, they just get fat and they become looking like land whales in time, and other men just accept it rather than like fight back against it, for example. And so like you still get attitudes like that still manifesting, even if women change their dating habits from hookup culture into actually getting with blokes for long-term financial stability, like what happened, let's say 200 years ago and whatnot. So
yeah, I mean, I'm noticing Mike the Brummie's comment here, and I'm not disagreeing with him at all. But I mean, you've also got to look at Hunter Biden, who's completely, balls deep in the Ukrainian corruption culture, and like videos of him snorting cocaine off of the rear ends of teenage prostitutes, So it's the Mike the Brummie. I'm not saying you're wrong, but it's not just those guys. We're told we're simplifying the dating situation. I don't know if that's true, Aubrey. I know it is harder for young men these days than it used to be. And one of the reasons it's harder is that women have too high an opinion of themselves in terms of like they'll rate how attractive they are really quite a lot higher than they really are. I mean, we were saying right at the start of this stream, the thing about OnlyFans and what Morgoth was saying about this when people said, oh no, it will just mean more women will go and do OnlyFans. You can only do OnlyFans if you're a 9 or a 10. If you want to make any money at it, that is. You can go and do OnlyFans if you're a 5, but you won't make any money. So, it's there is that. And as I say, I'm not saying well, Aubrey, guys need to look at girls as potential wives again is exactly what our side of the political divide says, actually, is it not, Mitch? Isn't that what you've been saying for ages? That blokes should be looking at women as potential wives? I think we've been saying that for years now, to be honest.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've only said it like, what, I don't know, a few times a day or a few times every stream or something.
Yeah, we've always, just to be clear to Aubrey in the chat there, that, we've always said that that's exactly what blokes should be doing, is looking at women as potential wives again. And also they should be doing that when women are young enough that, you can have families with them. The thing that's been happening in the West, in all Western nations, and also in places like Japan and South Korea, is that people haven't been getting married at all. And when they do get married, it's in their late 30s when the best years for having kids are already past for women. So you got both those things. Davey's saying he's seen some right munters coining it on TikTok. I don't know, mate. It's difficult to know how much money some of these people make, to be honest with you. It is. I think you've got to have certain assets to be able to make money as a woman on any of these video platforms. And I also agree with somebody who said I wouldn't be really interested in some woman who'd been flashing her bits all over the internet. Well, yeah, perfectly understandable. Why would you?
Yeah, I don't see how. I don't know.
But yeah, I do look, as I say, I think we've always pretty much on the DR, we've always had a similar message, which is that, you know, we need to get back to traditional style relationships. But that is very difficult when you have feminism telling chicks that you don't need no man, you know. I mean, it's not true for most women, but that's what they're told from the time they are very little girls at school,
and it's like,
you know.
And it's not about thing like, you know, sure, economic realities will change their dating practices somewhat, but the overall attitude of like egalitarianism and, well, into like hating on men, do we think that's going to suppress itself just because they now find it in a situation where, you know, their ideas do not work well in terms of independence for women because they just can't make it by themselves financially? I don't think such attitudes will actually die off because, you know, it's too ingrained into them.
I would say to Voltaire, Den, Top Talon, Craig, that you can find women in church. I tell you what, I've been to my local churches, not because I'm a big-time Christian, because I'm not, but I'm an agnostic, to be honest with you. I don't know in that stuff. I'm not an atheist. I used to be, but I haven't been an atheist for a long time now. But I don't think I'm ever going to go much further than agnostic. But I have been to about 3 of my local churches just out of interest. And I didn't see any women who were under 60. I've got to say, I didn't. Not one. So, you know, in some places, I'm sure you can join a church and you can meet a good girl at a church. I'm sure that's perfectly possible. But if you lived in my area, it wouldn't matter if you were a Catholic. Wouldn't matter if you're Anglican. It wouldn't matter if you were one of the descending sects. You wouldn't find anyone under 60. So, yeah, I don't know what good that's going to do you. If you live, like I say, my area may well not be typical, but I have to say that anecdotally, a lot of people tell me the same thing, that a lot of churches, the only people you're going to find there, especially in terms of women, is little old ladies, which are not going to do you much good. So
yeah, there's that. I mean, it's like what?
Well, Ashley Duke is saying the same, and John Best is also saying the same. So, you know. So, sorry, Mitch, carry on.
Well, it's like what? I mean, I've obviously shoved the idea that in terms of women, I mean, it's not the churches you'll find like the good women. It'll be like, I don't know, let's say your average like, pagan folk band, for example, because such bands, you know, the women who follow such bands, chances are they're more interested in their own heritage, so they're more easily to be morphed into what we are. It's like most normie women are practically no-go zones because I just think, I mean, well, fair enough, like you can get women who are just easily influenced by the men they're with, but also it's just like, okay, how infected can a woman be by the feminism before you start thinking to yourself, can this woman truly be saved?
As an aside, John Best, is that Colin Cowdrey in your avatar, the cricketer? Just tell me in the chat, just out of interest. I think it is, but I'm not sure. Look, I think I know for a fact, Mitch, that you're into some popular culture stuff. Wally Hammond, okay, mate, but same sort of era, sort of 1940s, 50s, yeah. But yeah, you're into some popular culture stuff, and I think you've got to play it by ear, and it's got to be stuff that you're into as a young dude. I mean, I'm not a young dude anymore, but when I was, it was a bit different because, you know, you could still, there was no internet really when I was little. I didn't get a computer till I was into my 30s. So, you know, when I was young, man, there was no internet. There were no mobile phones even, for God's sake. That's how old I am. the only way you met chicks basically was you went out in the evening, you went to a pub or you went to a nightclub or whatever it was, and you met chicks there. And because it was the only way you could meet people, there were plenty of quite reasonable girls at those places. They weren't all still into the hookup culture. I mean, yeah, there was some of that about. Of course there was. You know, I mean, I've done my fair share of one-night stands. I mean, I never really liked them, to be honest with you, but I've certainly done them when I was younger. And so it was a bit healthier back then, you know, because you still had a fairly limited field. I think where things have changed these days is because of the internet, you can have a woman who can she can look at blokes all over the place. So, you know, basically all over England or even Britain if you're in the UK, or over about 4 or 5 states in the USA, or over a couple of states or 3 states, or even the whole country in Australia, because although Australia is a huge place, the population's not that big. And what you tend to have is that women will go for the top 10, 20% of blokes. And that will be the top 10, 20% of blokes in terms of their income and how well they dress and how well they write stuff, and also what they look like, you know. And in a way, you can't blame women for that because, you know, women are all hypergamous for the most part anyway. I mean, all right, you should never say all, for the most part. But on the other hand, women overvalue themselves quite often in terms of their looks and so on, and what they bring to the pie, because the point is that, you know, a relationship requires 2 to tango, as people have said in the chat. And so both sides have to bring stuff into that relationship if it's going to work over a long term, and if it's going to be firm enough to like get married and have kids.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's got to be, it is a two-way street, but I don't think there's a single answer to it because, you know, joining a church ain't going to work in a lot of places. It might in some of the more religious parts of the USA, for example. Well, I think you're going to have a much harder time doing that in a church in Australia or in Britain. But that I may be wrong about that. You know, I've only looked. People are asking me in the chat what my criteria for women is. My criteria for women is entirely different because I'm getting on these days. Whereas a young dude's criteria for a woman needs to be totally different to what mine would be now, you know? I think that would make sense, wouldn't it, Mitch? You know, yeah, your criteria for a girl is going to be a lot different to mine. You know, my criteria for a girl basically these days, given that I'm in my late 50s now, my criteria for a woman is she's got to be reasonably cute and not overweight. That's the main thing. And yeah, if possible, not stupid. If possible, not stupid.
I don't know. I suppose there'll be like more minute points, like, oh well, for example, into similar, like, for example, into like open-minded insofar as like, you know, she won't bollock you because you like studying the Roman Empire too much or whatever. But also like, I don't know. But it's like, I don't know, like the kind of girls I can be into, like you're talking like if people know who Heilung or Wardruna are, like these sort of pagan folk band types, you know, very, very like focused into like heritage and whatnot. So any woman in that scene would be just one who very interested in their own heritage and thus like less likely to be self-loathing as a general rule. Aside from that, like, of course, you get physical appearance. Like, for example, you know, it's like on one end, I often show the idea of like goth girls or whatever, but then it's also, I'm not a big fan of tattoos on women by a general rule.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah, I'm not a big fan. I don't look, you know, these days, you are going to find chicks with, you're going to find it difficult to find, you're going to find it difficult to find a chick who doesn't have any tattoos at all. But like, you know, some chick who's got a little girly tattoo somewhere, I certainly wouldn't say that's going to put me off her. I would if she's got loads, especially if she's got loads that you can see even when she's dressed to go out. That I think should be a red flag for blokes.
it's what I mean. I don't mind, like, let's say, for argument's sake, a tattoo on their back if it's like on like a Japanese dragon or something or whatever. But it's like it's a different story when it's like, for example, their lower leg is just covered in tattoos, and you're thinking to yourself, I mean, just imagine, like, it's going to affect like the image you have. Let's say if she were to wear a red dress with you to a party or something.
Yeah, I don't understand women who get tattoos on their legs. They are so silly. They really are. I used to know a girl many moons ago who had a little tattoo of a pig on her foot, right? But it was small, and it was a traditional thing. She was a Patrick O'Brien fan, the author who wrote the Aubrey Maturin books that the Master and Commander, the movie, is based on. And he says somewhere in that series of books, and it's true, that sailors used to get a little tattoo of a pig, and it was considered lucky because pigs are really good swimmers, so you don't drown. And if you're a sailor, you don't want to drown, surprisingly. So she got that for that, and that was okay as far as I was concerned. She could wear a pair of high heel shoes and you couldn't see it. Yeah, so that would not be a big deal to me at all. The idea that any woman with a tattoo at all is not possible is nonsense. But if she's got tattoos on her legs or her lower arms and stuff like this, let alone her face, then yeah, that should be a big red flag to you as far as I'm concerned.
I can tolerate, let's say, I don't know, for example, if she gets like sort of pagan, like, heritage tattoos, for example, on her arms, not like entirely covered, but a couple here and there, I can tolerate that. If her entire body is just completely covered from her neck down to her feet, it's just a position where you think to yourself, come on.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, like, people aren't going to focus too much on, and let's say this girl wearing a red dress or like a cute black dress to a party or whatever, they're just going to focus more on like just all the tattoos, and a lot of them aren't exactly going to look the best because you got to think the average woman, their sense of tattoos, it's not exactly focused based on like heritage or whatever. It's actually just like roses and other generic like tramp stamps and shit like that.
Oh, listen, mate. If you're gonna put out girls who've got tramp stamps, and the smaller the back, I reckon that's like what 70% of women these days, probably. Because women do what's popular, and they see other girls doing that. That's why the tramp stamp became so popular, because chicks saw other chicks doing it. So nearly every chick now has got one. Yeah,
it's the same. It's the same as blokes who, like, for example, they get like these generic tattoos of, like, let's say, like a Viking, but it's not like a Viking as in actual Vikings. It's just like Vikings TV show, or Vikings like from a Vikings Valhalla game from Assassin's Creed. It would just be like the very pop culture form of Vikings, which is like so inauthentic compared to the actual Vikings.
Yeah,
because everyone just thinks they all basically look like Dark Ages version of biker gangs.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, it's so ridiculous how they make Vikings do this. I watched that Danish filmmaker's movie the other day, Valhalla Rising. Have you seen that one, Mitch?
Never heard of it.
Oh God, it's so slow. It's unbelievable. It really is. And I quite like him. He's the guy who made Drive, which is a good film, in my opinion. But this is a film he made. It's in English, but it's all filmed in Scotland, and it's about this group of dudes who are supposedly crusaders, and they're supposed to be going to the Holy Land, and this Viking guy called One Eye, who's a quite well-known Danish actor. And somehow or other, instead of going to the Holy Land, they end up going across the Atlantic and landing in North America. I don't know quite how you'd manage that, to be honest. Obviously, they had no sailors on their ship. So, when they were going for the Holy Land, it's kind of the wrong direction. But anyway, but they end up going there, and most of them get killed by the Native Americans, by the Red Indians, God, it's a slow film. But even he does that with the Vikings. He has this, like biker look that they give Vikings these days, which they never really had. They didn't look like that at all. They actually liked different colors and stuff, and their clothes were quite well made. People in the Dark Ages had quite well-made clothes, often homemade by their wives and mothers and sisters and people, That's the bloke I'm talking about, Voltaire Den Tolty Craig. Yes, that's the chap. And it really is a very slow film. It's not one of his best. But yeah, but you've got to make allowances, I think. Mitch is gone for a minute here. You've got to make allowances for modern chicks. One thing, Red Hawk, and I like Red Hawk, by the way, even though he's a he's a PUA, a pickup artist. I think Red Hawk makes a lot of very common sense statements about modern relationships. And the fact is that you are not going to get a right-wing based traditional woman. You're not. You might be able to create one, but you're not going to get one. Although no, it's not called Pathfinder. It's called Valhalla Rising, the film I'm talking about, and it is by that chap.
I don't really see how, in terms of the average actual dating scene. I mean, for example, I'll get flack at times for shilling the idea of dating goth girls. Full well that there's a lot of goth girls there who are just damaged people. They get involved with feminism, all the rest of the crap, or they get a lot of obscene tattoos. But it's also those sort of women are also more inclined, like the black metal chicks, pagan folk metal types, all those types are more inclined to be contrary to the establishment ideal of women.
So I think so. Yeah. No, I think you're right, mate. And also, they're less inclined to be like land elephants or lamb whales. You don't see so many of them who are lamb whales, which is something I think you've got to avoid. I'd say that's the first thing you've got to say as a bloke is don't go with fat women. It's like, because you're not going to get a less fat once you're with her, I can assure you. You're not. If she's fat to start with, she's going to stay fat. And is that body shaming? I don't think humans are meant to be fat. I don't think you should be fat either as a bloke. I've never been fat. I don't know. I probably am about 8 pounds more than I weighed when I was 19 and in the army. So I think I'm allowed to speak about that because, I've never been fat because I don't overeat and I do take some exercise. So,
Yeah, it's like Red Hawk will say, what do you think does more damage? Women getting fat after they've been with a bloke or porn? Because it's more, as much as porn destroys relationships, I think it's more just women who, let's say they get into a relationship and the guy is just too weak to tell her to stop gaining weight or whatever. So you get that, and it's just like, I don't know. It's like, you look at let's say, there's one couple I saw circa this was about years ago from a channel called Worth Fighting For. He's like a Portuguese merchandise fella on our side. He'll just post couples who both were chubby as hell, and then they start going to the gym regularly. And then after that, they just turn from being 4 out of 10s into 8 out of 10s, just because they start gaining weight, they lose a lot of it, and a lot more muscular. The woman doesn't look unnaturally muscular though. She just looks sort of I don't know, average woman sort of body build. She doesn't have she's not built like Ronda Rousey, whereas a bloke's a lot more built up than a woman.
Yeah, so look, I'm not one of these guys who likes women with abs and stuff like this. I don't like that at all. I think that's not what women should look like. I just think, and I'm not I don't really like very, very skinny girls, to be honest. I don't. But you want a girl who is average, You want a girl at least who is roughly average in terms for her height, yeah? If she's a little tiny bit overweight, that's okay. You can work on that with her, Take her walking, take her jogging, take her to the gym even, You can definitely work on that stuff. But if she's very overweight, then just don't do it, man. Just don't do it. I'm sorry. It's a mistake. I see women all the time who are walking around with little kids and they're absolute lamb-wiles. And I'm just thinking, who did that? You know, who on earth did that is what I think. It really is. But I do think that Red Hawk makes a good point about, like, don't expect to find a right-wing trad girl out there. You can turn a woman into a right-wing trad girl, because if a woman looks up to you, and if she's going to stay with you long term, she must look up to you, because she won't unless she does. She will gradually adopt many of your positions on that stuff, because women are not particularly into politics, but they will readily fall into line with a bloke who they admire. So, you know.
Yeah, I don't see I don't know anyone from the top of man who actually gets into a relationship with a fat woman for the sake of it. I mean, there was one Australian bloke on, like, he was circulating on Twitter, like, and he was on a road trip with his wife, and his wife is just like bragging about how she's eating loads of food because she knows it makes her hyperactive. And they're meant to, and she's with her husband on a road trip, and you could just see his face just like dying inside because he's just thinking his wife is just a complete land whale who's just admittedly making his life a hell just because she thinks it's funny or whatever.
Yeah, no, I do agree. But you know, you've got to use common sense as a bloke. You know, you really do. There is a lot you can do with your basic, average-sized, average woman. You can do a lot with them, and she will not mind you doing some of that stuff, providing you do it sensibly. And you can certainly, to some degree, mold her to be what you want her to be. You can, and there's nothing wrong with that, particularly if you are a little bit older than she is, which is a more sensible way to be with her. Like, you know, it used to be back in the 19th century that you would get 20-year-old chicks would prefer going out with blokes who were in their 30s. That was actually the more trad way this kind of stuff used to go on than it does today. You know, so you've got to do that. But I mean, I've tried doing streams on this for young blokes with people like Red Hawk, etc., and it's really difficult because you can't totally generalize, but you've got to be realistic as a trad bloke, and the woman you get is not going to be ideal, probably, particularly if she's a younger girl. You know, if she's like 19, 20, 21, even 25, and you're somewhere between, I don't know, 25 and 35. And a lot of the guys who watch the stream are younger than that, by the way. But you know, she's not going to be ideal when you first meet her, but you have to kind of work on it with her. And you will find, because women are not especially into stuff like politics, etc., she will probably gradually adopt your views. You know, it's noticeable. They've done surveys, certainly in America, and I'm sure they've probably done them in the UK and Australia as well. But I know in America, they've done the surveys, and like women married to Republican voting men tend to be Republican supporters. They just do. So, you know.
Yeah, like you get that one liberal bloke who, he got stabbed to death by a black guy in New York, and his girlfriend is just like, I mean, I think like the girlfriend's like Hispanic or something, like she's a complete shitlib, and she's just like posting photos of herself, being very narcissistic, you know. She's just been like, she's not even mourning the guy she was dating who got killed. She's just like posting all about herself on her Twitter feed or something like that. Like, it was, I remember like Morgoth talking about it or something like that. Like this one woman who was just, she just did not care at all about a dead boyfriend. Like, she cared more about the black suspect because she refused to describe the black suspect who killed her boyfriend.
Oh, right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, look, you like I said, you've got to look for someone who is savable. Although I don't mean that in the savable sense, because you can't really save anyone, to be honest, unless they want to be saved. But you've got to look for a girl who is not insane. That's always a good thing. Don't stick your dick in mad. It's a really bad idea. And be fussy, be fussy, guys, really. I'm not inexperienced with chicks, but I've never had an STD in my life, never one, because I was always damn fussy.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I don't know. It's like I would say, like, I don't know, half of women would be cancelled out. I would, like, in terms of, like, for our guys to bother dating, just because half of women are just, I suppose you can say they've gone too far, or I don't know, or perhaps like you can say like the programming from like feminism and all that. Let's just see it so deep into them. I don't know how much as a percentage wise of women in the West, because I mean you do get the whole meme also of guys my age going over to Eastern Europe to find a bird rather than date one over it, because the dating scene in this country is just so horrible. But like, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Look, I do think that the PUA guys give guys some good advice. Go to the gym, make yourself the best you can be, dress smartly. This is something I would definitely say is true of young men today, is sometimes they have no idea how to dress smartly. Even guys who are not by any means rich and on big salaries can afford, if they shop around sensibly, to dress pretty smartly. And I think that's always a good thing. Like, I'll give you a clue, guys. You, when you go out, probably, and your mates will never notice if your shoes are polished or not. If you meet a girl and go out to dinner with her, or go out to a cafe or a pub or something with her, she will notice if your shoes are polished. She really will, because women look at shit like that. Blokes don't. Right? By and large, we don't, but women do. So you've got to make yourself the best that you can be. And the other thing is, don't get overdone with this. Like, chicks all want people who are over 6 foot. Many girls couldn't tell you what 6 foot was, in terms of, actually showing you, oh, is this bloke 6 foot or is this bloke 6 foot? No, all she means is she wants you to be a bit taller than her. That's all she means, really. So, and if let's say you're 5'8", there are loads of chicks who are 5 foot to 5'4", loads, who will quite happily go out with you and think, yeah, I can look up to that guy, literally, which is part of what the thing is. Yeah, Aubrey, the thing is, in this show, you have to be in my Discord before you can be on this show. But you're not in my Discord, so you can't be on this show. In due course, you might be, but you're not now. So, anyway.
Yeah, I can't think of anything much more to say about this topic. I think we've just, like, I mean, I suppose the overall verdict is, yeah, the fact that the economic reality of a situation in the UK where living standards are getting worse, everything's getting more expensive, like insurance for cars, all the rest of it, just means that women will have to upend their previous, like everyone will have to upend their previous dating habits of, hookup culture, and that's going to go in the bin for the sake of now going back to what the loss of our grandparents or great grandparents did, which was marrying for the sake of financial security.
Yeah, so, I think there is that, but also tradition, of course, back then, Mitch. No Name in the chat says the women who pick up on minor presentational things tend to be the most shallow. I don't agree with that at all, No Name. I think all women pick up on minor presentational things. And I'm going to give you an interesting example of this. Every woman, and I've spoken to a lot of women about this, including people like Lady of Shalott, who all you guys know, and she agrees with me on this, that when a woman walks into a party or a bar or a restaurant or wherever it might be, within about 10 or 15 seconds, she has rated herself compared to every other woman in that place. That's how women are. They're all like that, and they do it. They don't even do it consciously, really. It's a subconscious thing, and it's just the way women have evolved. And they all do that, you know. So I think that you've got to expect all women to pick up on minor presentational things. That is why a woman who is actually in love with you and likes you will mess around and get you a good tie and this kind of stuff and make sure the knot's good. Most women will do that for you if they really like you. You know, they will. And Aubrey, no, I'm not having a direct here. You stop being stupid. But anyway, but yeah, it's women will pick up on that minor presentational stuff because it's one of the things they do, and it's not a bad thing. Like, men and women are supposed to complement each other. You know, we're not supposed to be the same because we're not, but we are supposed to complement each other. So I don't agree with you about that one, No Name. I think pretty much all women will do that. I'm sure you should never say all. There'll always be outliers and exceptions, but generally speaking, women will do that. And blokes can do themselves favors, particularly young blokes, if they take some care over their appearance and they make sure, you know, their hair's clean and stuff, and you know, they smell nice and all the rest of that shit, you know, which used to be absolutely bloody obvious back in the day, but you know, these days apparently you have to tell people. So yeah. But I think Morgoth might be right about this. But my overall thing about it is that in order to change this, you've got to get rid of a hell of a lot of conditioning, brainwashing, and propaganda that little girls get literally from the time they go to school. You know, literally as soon as when 7-year-olds start getting this shit pushed at them, you don't need no man. You know, you could be a boss girl and all this crap. And that stuff is far worse now than it used to be, even like 10 or 15 years ago. I don't disagree with you about that, Arlo. I would never actually be cruel to someone who's overweight. I just wouldn't go out with them. That's all I was saying. So there you go. What's the latest on Ukraine, Mitch? Because I know you keep an eye on these things. The Ruskies seem to be doing pretty well at the moment, from what I can see.
Well, it's like in the area around Bakhmut, it looks like the Russians have really pummeled the area. There's no ammo limit for the artillery and the drones there. So you'll have cases where the artillery are allowed to fire a shell even on just like one soldier by themselves.
Oof.
That's how extreme the artillery advantage is for the Russians in that particular sector. And it's like there's a lot of ground which the Russians have retaken because the Ukrainians have retreated, which it cost the Ukrainians deeply in blood back in the which talks about offensive from a few months back. Yeah, there's like an area called Klishivka, which is like south of Bakhmut, which it's built on like high ground, and if you were to advance, like if the Russians were to advance past that sector, they have to take Klishivka because it operates on such a domineering height and in the area. So it has to be taken by either side if they are to advance south of the city of Bakhmut. The Ukrainians have retreated because the artillery advantage is just meant that they really can't hold there. Unless they want to lose loads of good men in a short space of time. So they're having to give up that ground, which they paid for dearly in blood back in what you talked about offense. Because the thing was, when the Ukrainians took it, they weren't literally like, you know, they were literally they didn't try to encircle the place. It was just they're throwing waves of meat at the problem, and eventually it fell because the Russians in the area got exhausted. But eventually fell. The Ukrainians have held it since, and now they're getting pushed back. North of Bakhmut, around near a reservoir, the Ukrainians having their defensive positions just taken over relatively quickly. Like it's almost at the speed of a blitz in some respects.
Well, what was it the Germans gave the Ukrainians last week? Was it
1,750?
1,750 155mm shells. And, you know, the Russians will fire that like in half a day. So, what's the point of that? You know.
Well, it's like Ukrainians these days are firing average 3,000 artillery shells a day. 1,750.
So that's half a day's supply for Ukraine. That'll do them a lot of good. Yeah.
Yeah, 14 hours of worth of artillery cover in against an enemy who fire like tens of thousands a day all over the line from Kharkov Oblast down to like the Dnieper River, where the Ukrainians are apparently trying to do another river crossing, which do I bother commentating the river, given how all the river crossings have gone?
But they can't get enough men across the river to actually like expand it. I mean, they can get a little foothold, and then they get shelled to shit, and then they retreat. I mean, and that's all that's going to happen if they keep doing that.
Yeah, I mean, you've also got the every round of Divka where it looks like he's just getting squeezed harder and harder. I haven't heard of like any new ground being taken that I know of, that I can remember off by heart. But by the looks of it, like it's just like as I said, like Avdiivka is surrounded on three sides, so it's just like it's a really terrible situation. I mean, like they have no artillery cover in that area because if any artillery were to try and cover that area, they'd be in range themselves of the Russian artillery. Yeah. So any Ukrainian sitting in Avdiivka, he's doing so knowing full well that he's just going to have to fight alongside the men sitting beside him. He doesn't have artillery cover.
I'm still watching British Forces News, which is an MOD channel paid for by British taxpayers, constantly coming out with pro-Ukraine videos. And they even had one earlier, I'm not sure if it was today or yesterday, but they had one where they said, well, the US election could lead to the end of all supplies to Ukraine. Which maybe it could. I hope it does. But like, what are they suggesting? That Britain and the other countries could make up for that? Because we certainly can't. You know, it's just a joke. It really is. It's like these people are not that they have no common sense. Never known any military sense. They just have no common sense whatsoever. You know, it's just funny. Like, you know, when the new Argentine president was talking about taking the Falklands, right, which would be very difficult for the Argentines because, like, they have a load of debt, but they don't have much in the way of a navy or an air force anymore. But even at the time, I was thinking to myself, well, yeah, if the Brits did have to go down there, we've given away so many of our war stocks to Ukraine. I don't know what the people would be armed with. You know? Oh, dear, it's so funny. And you know, that's one war I would support, you know, to defend the actually British people of the Falkland Islands. Yeah, sure, of course, I'll fight that war, no problem. Because the people of the Falkland Islands always vote 99.9% to stay British. So, absolutely, that war is one I totally support. Send the whole fucking Royal Navy down there, by all means. But I don't know what weapons we're going to give the troops these days, because most of them we've given away to Ukraine, and we sure ain't replaced them yet.
Yeah, I don't see. I mean, I've also I don't know if you noticed on like Twitter back on like Sunday or Monday where it was just a complete doom fest for the Ukrainians. I think they've all just taken a bitter pill that the Americans actually don't care for Ukraine. They're actually gonna. Because you have a Polish who are blockading anything going from Poland into Ukraine, including much needed aid for stocks, food, all that stuff. The Polish were just like doing a blockade of the border, like they're forbidding any stuff from coming into Ukraine from Poland. So that was one thing. And then you also have an aid package getting blocked in Congress, and so all the American pro-Ukrainian commentators on Twitter and whatnot, they're all just doom posting, saying about how this is America, the arsenal of democracy is letting Ukraine be taken over by an autocratic dictatorship or blah blah blah.
Well, you mean Zelensky? Because the Rat King kind of is an autocratic dictatorship, far more than Putin is. But anyway, yeah, it's. Mike the Brummie makes a good point, and I would say that one of the things that is definitely happening is that when pushes come to shove, America is going to provide its aid to Israel before it is going to provide it to Ukraine. That's for sure. I mean, that's been perfectly demonstrated. But nonetheless, they have limited amounts to send to either place these days. And as for the Brits and the Germans, we have fuck all left because our war stocks were always entirely inadequate, even before we started giving stuff away.
Yeah, and it's like you saw that one picture of like an American. I can't remember where it was in America, but it was like a manufacturing plant for like the MIC. And
for 155 millimeter shells, they were all old dudes, eh?
Yeah, my problem. I'm just thinking to myself, okay, what is up with that? Like, you'd think they had to have like younger workers, like let's say below the age of 30 or something, not boomers who look like they're about to retire, still making shells for the sake of Ukraine. When you sit there thinking, okay, you'd think America would build up its military industry a lot more than that, especially when you consider, they've got new rivals now in form of Russia and China.
And the factory itself looked pretty old-fashioned, it has to be said. And that's one of the main facilities that makes 155 millimeter shells in the USA. And 155 is like your basic caliber for all of the Western nations, including the Americans.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it used to be that the Russians used to use 122 and 152. Although I think even Russia's gone on to 155 now, but I'm not sure about that. But I think it's true. But yeah, it's that's the major caliber for artillery. You got 105, which is light artillery, and you got 155, which is in medium. That was an old-fashioned looking factory manned by very old blokes who obviously are skilled at what they do. But I mean, as Mitch was saying, what are you going to do when all these boomers retire? So,
Yeah, it's like a competency crisis, as Morgoth will put it. It's really going to translate into a situation where what's America going to do when all their good workers retire and they have to speedily train up, let's say Zoomers, for example, who perhaps don't want to really work in the MIC, or it's just going to be a situation where everything will be related to decay in terms of that. So, for example, nuclear power. In a way, it's like with South Africa. Like, it's a good thing they got rid of their nuclear weapons, because imagine if the ANC have them now. Plus, also, and it's a good thing we don't have nuclear power as much in Britain as it is in France. Because again, imagine the competency crisis over there worsening. And we've got most of our electricity done by nuclear power. At least with wind turbines, you always know they're going to be ineffective anyway, even at that most competent crews taking care of them. So
yep. I'm just to John Best in the chat here. U.S. military is shit now. The entire Western military. What I would say is this, mate. The Western Special Forces dudes, like your Delta Force and your Navy SEALs and your SAS and your SBS in Britain and a few other units around the West, they're still pretty good. The more elite units like the US Marine Corps, the British Royal Marines, British Parachute Regiment, probably the US Airborne. I'm not sure about them so much these days because I don't follow it so much. Those guys still okay. French Foreign Legion, what have you. I think those guys are not so bad, but they are very small units now relative to the rest of the military. And our basic military is so feminized these days. Our basic military is so feminized these days. And that's true of Britain, America, and Australia. Like, you've got far too many women in frontline units in the military. Like I said, special forces and elite units, I think they're still not bad. But if you're going to talk about the general run of like the infantry in Britain or Australia or America, wouldn't have great reliance on them these days. I've got to say, I wouldn't. John Best also asked, is 203 millimeter heavy artillery? Yes, it is. but not many people use it anymore. Most people only go up to about 155 nowadays. In terms of tube artillery, of course, rockets are a different story. Aubrey is saying the US military is not shit, it's our leadership. Well, you might be right there, Aubrey, but I got to say the British military is nowhere near as good as it used to be, and it mainly because there's just too many women in it, and the whole organization has been feminized. And I think the problem with that is true also in America, and I think it's also true in Australia. But, that's just my view. Mike the Brummy says Cape Independence. Yes, I do support that. I think Robert Dugan what's his name? I can't remember his name. Robert something or other on Twitter has a lot of good things to say about that. He did a stream recently with Semiogo talking about that, which was really good. And I certainly think Cape Independence would be a good thing if they can get it. So there is that. That was what I was going to ask you about, Mitch. I think you watched the Russians with Attitude episode where they interviewed Dugan, the Russian philosopher dude. Did you watch that?
Yeah, I was watching a second time earlier.
That was a most interesting interview, I think, and I've got to say right off the bat, I hope the vile Ukrainian terrorists who killed that dude's daughter, who was just a journalist, for fuck's sake. She was just a journalist, and they blew her up. I hope they rot in hell. I really do. They killed that dude, and apparently that's the Western way we should make war now, is it? Like blowing up some poor bugger's daughter just because she was his daughter, and that's all they did it for.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason I know of that, they're saying she was posting anti-Ukrainian stuff, she was posting for the Russian military to smash the Ukrainian state and Ukrainian army.
You mean like a patriotic Russian would, like I would if we were fighting Ukraine, for example?
Yeah, she was pretty much saying very sort of quote-unquote anti-Ukrainian statements and all this. And it's and you look up the stuff she was posting, you didn't perceive struck me as she wasn't calling for Ukrainian babies to get killed off in drone strikes or whatever. She was just saying smash the Ukrainian state and the military, which that's fairly neutral from what I can see of it. It's for example, imagine
Mitch,
let's say
Mitch, one of the things that the dude brought up in that stream was that since the Color Revolution, when was it, in 2014 in Kiev?
Yeah, you were Maidan.
These guys were bombarding cities in the breakaway republics, and they were hitting nursery schools and hospitals and stuff, and they'd been doing it since 2014, and it was 9 years before Putin finally did something about it.
Yeah, and it's there's a common saying where it's where were you, Putin, or something like that. So it's but then there's that. But it's also you have a Donbass republics who, I don't know. I mean, it's Donetsk is still bombarded. It's not bombarded as much as it was say a year ago because Avdiivka was the main area they're bombarding from. But no artillery can stay in Avdiivka these days because of the Russians assaulting the area. But they were bombarding Donetsk, for example, for years and years.
Yep.
As well as
you can go and watch what's that American dude, Mitch, the American dude who used to be a US Navy guy who's married to a Russian lady, and
Patrick Lancaster.
Go and check out Patrick Lancaster's channel on YouTube. He visits many of these schools, nursery schools, hospitals, old folks' homes, etc., that the Ukrainians have bombarded over the years, and talks to people in them. So well worth doing. Go and check it out.
Yeah, it's I don't. I mean, as I said, with the latest news with Polish blockading at the border and the United States Congress now looking like they're just going to pull the plug. I'm just thinking to myself, I wonder how long it'll be before the Ukrainian state inevitably has to face a writing on the wall and just go, look, we can't win the war. Let's just come to terms with what we can.
John Best is saying Dugin is an idiot and no one cares about him in Russia. I don't think Dugin has anything like the influence over Putin and the ruling people in Russia as some of the Western mainstream media tries to claim. But then I don't think Dugin is anything like as bad as the Western media tries to claim. I mean, you know much more about this than me, Mitch, because you speak Russian. I mean, what do you think about that stuff?
I mean, he's able to meet up with Lukashenko at like in his own in the Belarusian presidential palace, so he's got a lot of influence. But I don't think. And the thing is, like, there are lots of Russian military generals and elites who read his books. How much of that they take that to heart is anyone's guess. I don't think there's actually a confirmed meeting that I know of that happened between Dugin and Putin at any given point.
Yep. The other thing I noticed, and this was on a different stream, everyone was turning around and saying, on this, I can't remember what stream it was now. I don't think it was that one that Dugin did, but they were all turning around and saying, "Oh, Putin was a KGB agent," and Putin wasn't. He was a KGB lawyer, as far as I understand it, wasn't
he? Yeah, it's more like I mean, he worked in Dresden, which isn't exactly. Oh, was it Dresden or Chemnitz or something? I can't remember. But he works in like a East German city, which wasn't exactly, top star intelligence work. It was more like bureaucratic stuff, from what I remember. He wasn't exactly like some KGB spy nabbing at documents.
No, he wasn't like a Soviet James Bond or anything like that. He was much more of his training. He was a lawyer, basically.
Yeah, and it's like
and he's quite cautious. He's quite a cautious man. If you look at what he actually does, he's quite cautious. It took him 9 years before he did something about the Ukrainians attacking actually people who wanted to be Russian in the breakaway republics. 9 years. He tried everything before he did war.
Yeah, because I mean, you get a lot of Russian nationalists who they don't like Putin because of his cautiousness, but then again, I mean, that's the thing about Putin. He's not like a military guy. I mean, he got into presidency because he went up against Chechnya and he had to be like a tough man. But but that was easy for him because no one supported Chechnya. You didn't really have NATO telling him not to invade Chechnya. He could do it whenever he so wished. And it's even meant like the Russian approach in the Second Chechen War was very similar to what's being waged now, where it's all about just artillery bombarding the enemy and then the infantry going in to sweep up what's left because they don't want heavy casualties. Especially when you consider in the Second Chechen War, a lot of the Russian troops were conscripts, so Putin was very conscious of that, and he didn't want heavy casualties like what happened under Yeltsin, where Pavel Grachev, who was like the head of the Russian army at the time, literally ordered tanks to storm Grozny without any infantry support, and the predictable happens.
They're gonna lose armor doing that for sure. I mean, also it's interesting. I mean, Chechnya these days seems to support Russia for the most part. I mean, there's certainly been quite a lot of Chechen troops fighting in Ukraine, as far as I can work out.
Yeah, I mean, for me, Chechens are a bit of a more of a meme these days. Like everyone just sees them as like TikTok fighters rather than actual soldiers. But you will see actual. You see Chechens fighting in like the Rosgvardia or actual armed forces, but the ones under Kadyrov are a lot more memed. So it's like a bit of a mixed bag with the Chechens. But by and large, I've heard of some like Chechens who like the ones who were living in France and America. A lot of them drummed up into like a sort of anti-Russian Chechen unit. From what I've heard, that unit has been badly blooded by the Russians because that unit was particularly targeted because, well, it's like I think Kadyrov actually requested it himself because he went, look, like these guys are traitors to Chechnya. They're sort of Wahhabist types who fought alongside the Taliban, and they're the kind of Chechens who, they just want they're Chechen nationalists insofar as bloodlust for Russians, not actual Chechen nationalists in terms of love for their people. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, that makes sense to me. I mean, look, it's. I think anyone who thinks that Putin has ambitions beyond Ukraine and only the bits of Ukraine which are basically Russian, which, by the way, includes Odessa. I'd be amazed if Putin's ambitions did not extend to Odessa and, by extension, the whole of Ukraine's Black Sea coast, because that way he can make the Crimea and its naval base, which is very important to the Russians, secure from Ukrainian attack, pretty secure anyway. I think that's where Putin's ambitions go, liberating the pro-Russian people in Ukraine who still want to be Russian, and that includes Odessa. And I think that's as far as it will go. I don't think he's got any interest in conquering Western Ukraine, which is not particularly pro-Russian. And why would the Russians want to be there? They don't want
no one wants
a Northern Ireland kind of situation. They don't.
No, it's like, no, I mean, well, it's like you take Chechnya. I mean, they had to work with a place by appointing local leaders in the form of the Kadyrov family, and that sweetened the deal for the Chechens. Otherwise, it would just be a long, drawn-out guerrilla war that would never end in. But Putin was able to defuse Chechnya by working with the Kadyrov family, who were a local elite in that area. There's not really much of a local elite in Western Ukraine who are willing to work with Russia at all. So there'd be no point taking over Western Ukraine. It's not about,
you can look at the Roman Empire, you can look at the British Empire. That's what they did. They would get a local elite on their side, and that's the way they would run that part of the world. But they would accept all the local gods and all the rest of it, and great, no problem. That's the way good empires are run. But I don't think Putin and the Russian leadership have the least interest in conquering anywhere else. Like, they know damn well that if they went into the Baltic republics, for example, which they certainly could do militarily, or Finland, or anywhere beyond Ukraine, or even Western Ukraine, militarily, yeah, they could do it, but why do they want to fight a 25-year war? That's the Western trick that we always do, and then have to withdraw at the end of it. I don't think the Russians are that stupid, to be honest with you.
Well, can you imagine, for argument's sake, Russia might want the Baltic states at some point, just because, I don't know, like they're too close to St. Petersburg, like with Finland, I don't know. But then again, the thing is, I don't think Putin doesn't strike me as the kind of guy who wants to conquer all the lands of the former Russian and Soviet empires. No. He's just more of a...
That's a Western MSM meme, is that Putin wants to do that. He's not this Stalin figure.
Yeah, because they misinterpreted his famous saying, because he said, whoever doesn't miss the Soviet Union has no heart, but whoever wants it back has no brain. They only remember the first half of that quote, but never remember the second half, where he said, whoever wants the Soviet Union back has no brain. Because he's himself conceding, like, Russia can't just domineer over, say, Eastern Europe all over again and expect it like a soft deal or anything. No, it's a simple case of the best thing for Russia would be some sort of East Slavic Union state where Russia, Belarus, as well as Eastern and Southern Ukraine united together as one Union state. I mean, kind of like what Gorbachev wanted with his Union State Treaty, where it was a lot more.
So kind of a federal system, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Russia is quite federal in terms of its legal approach. I mean, for example, you have republics like Chechnya, Dagestan, Yakutia, Buryatia, etc. So all the different ethnic groups have their own representation under the federal system in Russia. But like the East Slavs united under one state, that's like one thing Russian nationalists dream of a lot. Dugin is very much of a Eurasianist in that he thinks that Russia's destiny lies not in, getting good deals with Europe, but rather pivoting over to a Russo-Chinese alliance through dominating Central Asia, getting on well with Mongolia, all that sort of stuff.
But if I was a Russian, I've got to say, like, their attempts to try and integrate with Europe were not successful. I mean, all right, they were sabotaged by the Ukrainians and the Americans, and to some degree the Brits, I have to say, as well. But that didn't work out too well for them. And I think Putin just wants to consolidate Russian power as much as he can. But then, to be honest, I think that's what any national leaders should do. I mean, if we had a real nationalist leader in Britain, I would want them to consolidate British power as much as they could. Like, I'd turn around and say all the British overseas territories now are part of Britain. I wouldn't have them as British overseas territories. I'd say no, they're all integral part of Britain now, and I'd let them send one MP to Parliament, the smaller one.
Yeah, I mean, Russia's like a country which, the Russians don't particularly lust for land in the way that people think. Because, there's plenty of land in their own country.
Well, it's the biggest country in the world, mate, isn't it?
Well, yeah, it's not that. I can understand the Russians wanting to annex eastern and southern Ukraine as well as Belarus at some point, but I can't imagine them for them, for example, wanted to annex countries like Armenia and Azerbaijan, knowing full well that the Soviet Union had to go to great efforts to diffuse ethnic tensions in the area. I don't think the Russians want to keep investing. It's not just about. Georgia, for example, in the Caucasus, was known for being very corrupt in the time of the Soviet Union, and that's why the Russians have a deep distrust of Georgians as a general, alongside distrusting the Uzbeks, who are also known for just being very corrupt.
And of course, Stalin was a Georgian, wasn't he?
Yeah, and he was. He often put Georgia high on a pedestal. Like, he'd often give them a disproportionate share of resources or a state budget compared to the other republics, where, for example, the industrial heartland of Siberia, for example, like Novosibirsk, they've got peanuts compared to a country like Georgia or Uzbekistan and the Soviet Union, because it was literally just, in much the same way that you could argue our elites run the show in terms of asset stripping for whites to pay for all the blacks and whatnot. So did the Soviet Union towards the Russians in favor of all the minority groups of Uzbeks, Kazakhs, Azerbaijanis, Latvians, you name it. All these minority groups who hate the Russians a lot.
Mm-hmm. And yet these days, you look at, say, Vladivostok, for example, that's a city in the very far east of Russia that's far closer to Japan than it is Moscow. And that's a city that seems to be doing very well these days.
Yeah, I've heard. To be fair, it's always going to do well because it's got a stable sort of economy in the form of service in the Russian Pacific Navy. But it's also because it's also at the far east end of the Trans-Siberian Railway as well. So Vladivostok is that one city where it'll do comparatively well compared to other cities like but much further.
It looks pretty good. I've seen a few videos on it, Mitch, and it looks like a place that one could live, actually, because it's got nice old 19th century Tsarist buildings and stuff like this. It's not got as many commie blocks as many other places in Russia, but it's also got nice restaurants. It's got interesting places to go visit. I've always thought Vladivostok is a place I wouldn't mind visiting. Actually, it looked quite interesting.
Yeah, I've heard other cities because of a Eurasian alignment on Russia's behalf. There's cities like Astrakhan, which is on the shores of the Caspian Sea. Because the thing is, what Russia does is they send ships from to trade with India rather than going from Vladivostok or through the Suez Canal all the way to India the long way. Instead, what they'll do is they'll use the Caspian Sea and Iran as a byway point and get into India. So that's a situation where, for example, the south of Russia is doing a lot better because of this new alignment that's happening, while And it's like, I mean, you can also tell that the Russian economy is doing well because I've heard something like the Russians, when they're producing like 40,000 drones a month.
Yeah, anyone who thought sanctions were going to ruin Russia has just come completely unstuck because they're not.
Yeah, it's not just that. I mean,
I'd swap the British economy for the Russian economy any day because Russia actually makes things and Britain doesn't make hardly anything these days.
Yeah, it's like the agricultural sector, for example, that boomed after the sanctions with Crimea because like Putin realized, oh yeah, Russia's not self-sufficient in food as much as it needs to be. So a lot more investment went into that. By 2022, the agricultural sector was completely revitalized and it's now in a position where it's not only self-sufficient for Russia but also exporting grain to other countries, which came in handy when you had the whole grain deal getting cancelled a while back.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
I mean, the other thing I was going to say here is that do we want to talk a little bit about the Netherlands and Holland and Geert Wilders?
I don't really know much. I don't know what to say about it because I'm thinking, on one hand, it's a lot better than what they had under that Rutte fella, who's like a complete shit.
For sure, 100%.
But then again, it's also Wilders is not the be all and end all. And
no,
how do we know?
Yeah, he has his weaknesses. He's not against gay marriage or anything like that. But he is against mass fur-border immigration, and he does want to leave the EU, which I think are both positives. I don't know. I haven't been able to work out what's happening there yet at the moment. Like, because although he is easily the biggest pie, most of the other pies, in the interest, in inverted commas, of our democracy, are refusing to operate with him. So, I don't know if you know any more about that, Mitch.
Wait. From what I've heard, I think it's something. I think the Forum for Democracy Party, led by I can't remember his name. Thierry
I know
Baudet
I know the guy
like
you mean. He said he will cooperate, but I think that still leaves Wilders a little bit short of an overall majority, doesn't it? I'm not sure that.
Yeah, so you got him, and he's like, I think, I don't know. I'm trying to think. I mean, I know there's like a party in the Dutch parliament called Denk, and the whole point of it is it's just like a Muslim interest party, like a Sharia party, but it's also run by Turk. But it's also run for, but it's also like a Turkish nationalist party as well.
Yeah.
So I mean, they've got quite a few seats just because there's so many Turks in the Netherlands, just like there are in Germany. Unfortunately.
Sadly for both countries, yes, but okay.
Yeah, it was like, I don't know. I don't know if like.
So
yeah, I haven't really kept up to date with.
We don't yet know who's actually going to form the government in the Netherlands. But they could have a minority government, I guess. Most countries can.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. Is like it's like people talk about like the hung parliament of 2017 was, for example, something that doesn't really happen that often in British politics, whereas on the continent, I think the Dutch have proportional representation, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they do.
So so it's kind of like the Weimar Germany system where you never actually have a majority in power. It's always coalitions working together, and that's just the way it's always been. I mean, Italy is the worst example where they never have a stable government lasting more than like 3 years or something because it's just that's the way Italy is. The Netherlands generally tends to be a lot more stable than that. But yeah,
they have that Northern European stoicism going on. Yeah, but I mean, part of the reason Wilders won is because all that nonsense that the so-called centre party was doing to the Dutch farmers. They were basically trying to destroy them over the green crap, which is basically crap. Like all that man-made climate change stuff is rubbish as far as I'm concerned. And yes, you do put one of your propaganda notes above this, by the way.
Yeah, did you see that one photo? I think it's like a bunch of like leaders meeting to talk about global warming and all this, and all their planes had frozen at the airport.
The funniest one I saw was the dude who was actually hosting that global climate change thing, who of course is in a oil republic, pretty much. An oil state, I should say, not republic. Who said basically the evidence for this is crap, which it is. It's crap. All the evidence for man-made global warming is crap, and most of it is designed to make Western nations poor. That's all it's designed to do, is to make you live in the pod, eat the bugs, live in a 15-minute sea, not be allowed to have a car, and only be allowed to fly overseas once every 5 or 6 years, unless, of course, you're one of these elites, when your private jet will take you anywhere you like, anytime you like. And honestly, that is just the truth. It just is. And the idea that we can run our nations on wind farms that kill tens of thousands of birds every year, and solar panels, which in Northwest Europe only work a very short amount of time, and basically make it impossible for any other wildlife to live within all the acreage that you have to put those solar panels in. The idea that this is how we can make ourselves like good people is just insanity. And like, you know, it's as insane as pretending that blokes who want to pretend to be women are somehow women. You know, it's just as insane as that. It's like when we say we live in clown world, we really do live in clown world. You know? So I don't know. Mitch, any final thoughts, mate? Mitch, maybe you've gone away for a minute. Yeah, I don't know. I just think. I'm sorry, Mitch.
I can't think. I'm just scrolling on my Twitter, just trying to think of any other topics, I suppose. Like,
yeah, no worries. Mate.
I don't know if you heard about Destiny getting divorced.
Oh, well, the open marriage Destiny, who used to be a cuck for his wife all the time.
Well, he's still a cock. I mean, he just refuses to take the L insofar as his wife's divorcing him for the sake of a femboy who has to sit on the lap of Destiny's wife.
Well, there you go. I mean, like, you know, any man who lets his wife go and have sex with other people is not a man, in my opinion. I'm sorry. If any boyfriend who lets his girlfriend go and have sex with other people, you ain't a bloke. You're not a bloke, guys. And that girl will despise you. 100%, she will despise you.
Yeah, I don't.
You know.
I mean, the bit that's funny about it is, like, for example, he was very boastful about that particular lifestyle, where he was just like glad that his wife sleeps with other men, and in the end, he's like, his wife's divorcing him because she's got no respect for the guy, and he refuses to take the bitter L about it.
I just think he's pathetic, mate. That's the only thing. But I always thought he was pathetic anyway. You know, if you have a woman, whether she be your girlfriend or your wife, and you let her go and do that stuff with other blokes, she's just going to end up despising you. Sorry, that's all that's going to happen. If you want to be despised by your woman, by all means, go and do that. But you know what? She will leave you for someone she doesn't despise. She will. It's insane.
Yeah, I don't. I don't see how, like, I remember one time that he was fed posting about the BLM riots, like 3.5 years back, and it's like everyone's, oh, this proves that Destiny is a fascist or something. No, it wasn't. It was literally just because his pizza was late because of all the riots, so he just starts fed posting about all the BLM riots. That's the kind of guy he is, where he will just, he's always a liberal except when his pizza's late, in which case he just goes full fash, as it were.
Your fucking pizza is like, oh, thank God. That's just so crazy. It really is. Bilbo, I presume he's talking about Destiny's wife. don't give a shit. I mean, honestly, I wouldn't piss on Destiny's wife if she was on fire, but that's just me, you understand? But whatever. I'd let her burn, frankly, rather than piss on her, but that's just me. But yeah, you guys, you know, if you want to find yourself a goal, and we were talking about this for a long time earlier, women will only stay with you so long as they look up to you. You and women are not the same. Do not make that mistake. You are not the same. You are not equal in that way. What you are is women will like you if they look up to you. They like to do that literally in that they like you to be a bit taller than them, but they like to do that in the more intellectual manner that they actually look up to you and admire you. And a woman who doesn't will leave you. She just will. That's what chicks do, babes. Get it right? Because that's the truth. And it's never changed. It's been the same since the ancient Greeks and probably even before. And it's never, ever going to change, no matter what feminism says. So there you go.
I know. I mean, the only other thing is, if there's anyone in the UK, vote for Nigel Farage on a celebrity app just to make sure he wins, or has the best chance of winning anyway.
Yeah, look, I'm not sure about that thing that Farage has done, mate. I guess it won't hurt if he wins, but
to be fair, mate, you got, for example, a moment where he's meeting with his daughter. I mean, that's got came for some of that because he's personalising him in front of the public. Like, I can't think of it as some sort of monster anymore. Because I mean, but
that's true.
Just watched him.
Yeah.
True. So you know what he's doing. You know what he's doing is like building up a sense of personality, so that people can't hate him. Like,
like
I mean, people already know him.
He's not literally Adolf, babes. Yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, that's why he's doing it. I can see why he's doing it.
I hope you're right, Mitch. I really do, because I have my issues with some of the things that Farage says, but I think he's our best hope at the moment. I gotta say, because I don't see anyone else. Sadly, and it's like people talk about Geert Wilders in the Netherlands. Is he perfect? Nowhere near, but is he a lot better than the likes of Joe Biden or Rishi Sunak? Yeah, 1,000%. So, same with Trump in America. Would Trump be better than Biden? Yeah, of course he would. So you've got to take what you can get, I reckon. We've got to be realistic here. And would I take Nigel Farage as British Prime Minister over Rishi Sunak? In a nanosecond. Or the dude, Sir Keir Starmer, who was, as I constantly try and remind people, Sir Keir Starmer, the Labour leader, he was the director of public prosecutions at the height of the grooming gang scandals in the UK. And those grooming gang scandals still continue. And what Keir Starmer did was to make sure that very few of them got prosecuted. And you want to vote for him, dear? A guy who was quite happy to see girls as young as 11, little English schoolgirls, being sexually exploited and tortured and racially humiliated by Muslims living in Britain, because that's what Sir Keir Starmer did. So you want to vote for Labour? Go vote for Labour. I am never going to vote for those fucks, not as long as I breathe. But yeah, if you're on the dissident right in the UK, don't get me wrong, I despise the so-called conservatives under the Indian banker Rishi Sunak. I despise them. But the Conservatives, in air quotes, and Labour are a uni-pie. And the Lib Dems and the Greens are also part of that same uni-pie. If you're going to vote for anything in the next general election, you've got to vote for one of the smaller populist right of centre parties. And it doesn't even matter which one, just the one that's got the most chance of winning in your area. And actually, if those twats had any brains, they would be forming some sort of an alliance. But, maybe they will. Maybe they will. Anything you wanted to show, Mitch?
Not for me, but I've heard like Reform, they're probably got 10%, I believe. So they've started to
they are. They're going up. They are going up. And you know what? I've got my problems with Richard Tice. I do. There's many things he says I don't agree with. But would I prefer him to Sunak or Keir Starmer? Yeah, 100%. 100%. Just because it would be a change. So you don't want to plug your Twitter or anything like that, Mitch?
I mean, people can find my Twitter if they so wish, but I don't know. Like, no.
All right, mate. All right. Thank you very much for joining me this evening, Mitch. I would have been without a guest this evening otherwise. But, we're getting to the Christmas party time of the year. Me, I'm not a big fan of Christmas parties, but I'm always a bit antisocial, it has to be said, I think. And I'm going to play us out with a tune, as I often do.
Sing a song in praise of Jack the Sailor. Sing a song about a jolly tar. Why not boast of those who gather close? Right proud of them we are. Must we always sing of Tommy and King? Not one word for Jack. When on land he makes a mighty stand and beats the foeman back. Why in our glory do we tar? What is the secret of our power? It is the Navy, the British Navy, that keeps our foes at bay. Our old song, Britannia rules the wave, we still can sing today. We've got a Navy, a fighting Navy, our neighbors know that true. And it keeps them in their place, for they know they have to face the lively little lads in navy blue. Years ago, when serving for the country, British stars have met a many foes. How Jack fought in victories dearly bought, our history plainly shows. What we did in glorious days of Nelson, England still can do. Hearts so old, still from the foreign yoke, the old song holds true. Why in our glory do we part? What is the secret of our power? It is the Navy, the British Navy, that keeps our foes at bay. Our old song, Britannia rolls away, we still can sing today. We've got a Navy, a fighting Navy, our neighbors know that's true. And it keeps them in their place, for they know they have to face the lively little lads in navy blue.
Okay, that was The Lads in Navy Blue, which was a song from the early 20th century, traditional British song. From Patriotic Archive, please, guys, go and subscribe to Patriotic Archive. He's got loads of really good traditional British music. Not all of it is military and naval. Quite a lot of it these days is traditional British songs as well. So if you're into English and British history, tradition, etc., Patriotic Archive, great channel to go and follow. Thank you very much to Mitch, my guest for this evening. And I will speak to you guys in due course. Maybe I'll even get this Wellington stream done before Christmas. I hope so. Also, never let the bastards grind you down. So go wild, boys and ladies. Oh, hang on. I should also, before I go, I should quickly check my entropy channel just in case we got any super chats. No, we didn't. There we go. I thought I should check it because I try and be fair. All right, guys. We'll see you next week. And never let the bastards grind you down.